In a moment, we'll be listening to a contribution titled Religious Tolerance and Inclusiveness. Let me take a moment to talk about the contributor. His Eminence Muhammad Sa'ad Abubakar, CFR, MNI, is the 20th Sultan of Sokoto and President General of the Nigerian Supreme Council for Islamic Affairs, ascending the throne of his forebears some 17 years ago. This foremost traditional ruler was a career military officer and rose to the rank of a one-star general before answering the call to mount the exalted throne of both the head of the Sokoto Caliphate and spiritual head of Muslims in Nigeria. He served as defense attaché of the Nigerian High Commission to Pakistan with concurrent accreditation to Iraq, the Gulf states, and Saudi Arabia. His clear display of intense patriotism and passion for Nigeria's development saw him attending the senior executive course at the National Institute of Policy and Strategic Studies, KURU, in 2006. Presently, he serves as co-chair of the Nigeria Interreligious Council, a body established to provide religious and traditional leaders with a platform to contribute to national cohesion and promote greater interaction, as well as better understanding among the leaders and their followers in the country. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, may I now respectfully invite His Eminence Muhammad Sa'ad Abubakar III, CFR, Sultan of Sokoto, to deliver his paper. Your Eminence.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وصلى الله على النبي الكريم. Your Excellency, the President, Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, President Muhammadu Buhari, GCFR, who is living in a couple of hours on a very, very high note and much healthier and looking much fresher despite all the odds and the tension. The Vice President-elect, Hashim Shettima, GCON, our own dear, very dear brother, the former President of Kenya, Uhuru Kenyatta, whose last sentences or words were those of a very patriotic Nigerian. We thank you for your comments, and we believe those who have ears must have heard you very clearly. I must recognize my co-contributors to this inaugural lecture, and of course, the owner of Ife, my own very dear brother, the co-chair of the National Council of Traditional Rulers, and other distinguished leaders of this great country. I greet you all in the best form of greeting. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We've just had a very interesting topic given to us by highly experienced and respected elder statesmen in our great continent, Africa, and the world. When you are called to speak after such a very eloquent lecture telling us what his experiences have been and are still going on in his dear country and Africa, and given the topic to speak on religious tolerance and inclusiveness, and also knowing and taking note that yesterday at the National Mosque we had a lecture which captured all the ingredients, or most of the ingredients, of religious tolerance and inclusiveness. I believe I shouldn't be saying much on that religious tolerance. Tolerance is what we have been working on the last 16 years as co-chairman of NAREC, together with the president of CAN, and I believe the SGF in the last 5, 6, 7 years had been the anchor and the arrowhead of our activities, so he knows a lot, and the government too knows a lot about our works for religious tolerance and understanding in this great country, Nigeria. So I will deviate a little bit, but not too off, because most of the things I'm going to say, if you put them together with what the former president of Kenya said, you'll find a lot of similarities. So I crave your indulgence to patiently listen in the next 8, 9, 10 minutes of my presentation, even though I was given 15 minutes. We all know why we have democracy. And we call democracy a government of the people, by the people, for the people. And such democracy we are supposed to practice or to have is to ensure development, peace and stability of our people. And without development, without peace and stability, there's no democracy. And you can't have democracy when you don't have good leaders to practice that democracy. So leadership is of utmost importance if you want to really practice democracy, move the country forward to the greatest heights. So I'll briefly talk about some of the things that I'm so very familiar with, what leadership is all about, because there's need for us to look at what we should do. I'll skip a lot of sentences or comments that people might not understand. But I want to start by expressing our deep gratitude to Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Most High, for making it possible to witness the 7th consecutive democratic transition of power in our great country, Nigeria, without any major hitch or crisis. This in itself is a significant achievement in which both the winners and those who did not win, I don't call them losers, those who won and those who did not win share in the credit. The lecture from our distinguished speaker has been well conceived and delivered, and I believe we've all heard it. Our task here is to see how we can enrich the conversation by broadening the perspectives and propounding advice to the incoming administration of our great country on ways to improve on governance and development in an atmosphere of peace and security. Coming from a tradition of good governance that is informed by an intellectual tradition, which itself is an heir of a long tradition of governance going back to the empires of Ghana, Mali, and Songhai, perhaps my contribution should dwell on the writings of our forefathers who established the Sokoto Caliphate over 200 years ago. Being scholars, these leaders have left behind over 350 different works between the three prominent figures. I will just provide some few snippets to take us through this short presentation. On the necessity of government, for example, Sultan Muhammad Bello said, "It is certainly known that if it were not for the power of rulers, no person would have been safe in his house, let alone in the wilderness, nor would it be permissible for any person to collect tax, and the interest of the public would not have been preserved. For this reason, it becomes necessary to appoint a supreme leader and his deputies, such as the prime ministers, the governors, and the judges of all the regions of the earth, so that the interest of religion and leadership may be maintained and the proper order of the entire world be established." If it were not for the authority of state, many people would have been killed before they could kill a single man who is legally condemned to death when they seek to obtain their rights from each other without a force to protect them. Rulers in our case are those who have been elected to govern us, govern our country or our states at both the federal and state levels, should see leadership as a trust from God, for which they have to ultimately account to him, as Sheikh Abdullah bin Fodio said. Verily, political power is a vicegerency from Allah and a stewardship from God's apostle. How great then its dignity and how heavy are its burdens. If the leader follows the path of righteousness, piety will take ascendancy over his worldly desires. If he goes astray, his piety will fall victim to worldly lust. Therefore, fear God. Know that every soul shall have a taste of death, and you shall receive your full recompense on the day of judgment. Leadership is also service to the people. As Sheikh Uthman Amfodio said, seeing to the welfare of people is more effective than the use of force. It has been said that the crown of a leader is his integrity, his stronghold is his impartiality, and his wealth is that of his people. There will be no triumph with transgression, no rule without learning, and no leadership with vengeance. No society can rise above its leaders. In other words, it is the quality of leaders which determines and pegs the quality of society. As Sultan Muhammad Bello said, leaders are like a spring of water, and all our officials are like water wheels. If the spring is pure, the filth in the water wheels cannot harm it. If, on the other hand, the spring is polluted and dirty, the purity of the water wheels that have been used to draw the water will have little or no effect on the purity of the water. Leaders still need to be very careful in the appointment of officials, and Sheikh Uthman bin Fodio said, the first support is on upright wazir, that is a prime minister or a deputy over the state, who wakes him, the leader, who wakes him up if he sleeps, give him sight if he cannot see, and remind him if he forgets. The greatest catastrophe which can befall leaders and people is to be deprived of good wazirs or ministers and good assistances. The most important qualifying attitude or attribute of the leader of the wazir is to be of trustworthy conduct, perceptive in the affairs of the common people, the courage to tell the truth, and must not withhold good advice from the leader. Muhammad Bello has a piece of advice to these officials in his Usul Siyas, one of his very famous books, where he wrote, the happiest leader is he whose subjects are happy with him, and the most unfortunate leader is he whose subjects are miserable under him. So beware of injustice, for your workers are imitating you. If you commit injustice, you will be like the animal in a green pasture, which eats so much that it becomes so fat, and that fatness is the cause of its destruction, as it will be slaughtered and eaten, unquote. Leaders need to understand those things that are necessary for a state to survive. and those that are culpable of destroying polities. On this, Sheikh Uthman Danfodio wrote, one of the swiftest ways of destroying a state is to give preference to one particular tribe over another, or to show favor to one group of people over the other, and draw near those who should be kept away, and keep away those who should be drawn near you. A ruler was asked when he had lost his throne, what brought your rule to an end? He replied, being intransigent in my views and neglecting to seek advice. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, these are some of the few remarks I want to make to draw attention of our incoming governors, presidents, and other leaders on the intellectual heritage which we have been talking about for decades, or for centuries rather, which I hope our elected officials will reflect on and find useful as they undertake the onerous task of children with the affairs of the state. I should also draw your attention to levels of poverty and ignorance in the land, only made worse by the rising population of this country, which is estimated by the United Nations to be well over 400 million by 2050, which will make Nigeria the third largest populated country in the world after India and China. As political leaders, you need not only think of the next election, but also, and more importantly, think of the next generation. I leave you with these thoughts and pray for God's guidance, wisdom, and patience, for our leaders to take our country to the highest height, and may we have peace and stability in our great country, Nigeria, and as we wish our incoming government most of the Allah's blessings in all what they do to take our country to the promised land, we call on all and all to give support, prayer, and stay in peace. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward all of our leaders for what they have done for our country, and may He bring peace and stability. As I also leave you in peace, I say, wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
His Eminence Mohammed Saad Abubakar III, CFR, Sultan of Sokoto, speaking there. Your Excellencies, distinguished